Hey, howdy, this is Kate Rains, and I want to welcome you to my class. That's my dog Jupiter at a local beach here on Bainbridge Island where I live. And the best class in the world you are now officially in, Education 121, Multicultural Children's Literature. Ta-da! My most favorite quote ever, some things one can see for oneself, other things depend on the telling of the tale. Like this tale or this children's book, for example, Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type. It's a whimsical little story with some wonderful little watercolors, just talking about how the cows have decided to take over the barn in order to get their way with Farmer Brown. Simple stuff, right? But if you dig a little deeper, this book is actually about anarchy, how they're taking over the place, and unless you comply with their conditions, you're not getting any milk out of those cows. Another book, When a Bully is President. What? A bully president? Truth and Creativity for Oppressive Times? A children's book? There's lots of them out there, and we're going to look at some, and we're going to talk more about the importance of diverse children's literature. Now, it might not be as big as a solar eclipse. That's my daughter Zoe, actually. But this is something kind of fabulous. Harry Potter saved my life. But let's push aside J.K. Rowling's transphobia just for a second, not excusing it. But I think this is an interesting study, so I'm continuing to keep it in my lecture. How, based on kids reading Harry Potter books, the Harry Potter series, they found out in a scientific study that it reduced their prejudices towards minority groups. So that's how they talk about it in the UK. So reduce their prejudice against marginalized groups in the United States, right? That's a pretty amazing thing. Think about it. You read a couple of kind of entertaining books, and you can not be quite the asshat you were before in terms of racism, sexism maybe, just prejudices, presidential. Oh, you know what I mean. In general, that's pretty good, right? Too bad this group obviously didn't read Harry Potter. Maybe if they read the whole series that would have helped, but I don't know. And this rather recent group, storming the Capitol, they need a heck of a lot more Harry Potter than that. But it makes a good point, right? So when we talk about children's literature, diverse children's literature, multicultural children's literature, we're talking about a whole lot of stuff, right? This is a book that is, we pray, fingers crossed, is out of the system. But this book is still in print. So if it's still in print, that means it's still in the hands of children, and it's in the hands of teachers and adults that are reading this stuff to children. And there's some pretty awful negative stereotypes when we have these kind of books still out there. They're in the libraries. There might be one in our library actually right now. So interesting quote that I still love to say. The Council on Interracial Books for Children found that children are repeatedly exposed to racist and sexist attitudes in books and, media in general, right? And that this overexposure to all of these horrific messages gradually distorts their perceptions until, boom, stereotypes are accepted as a reality. Now, this is big stuff, right? We keep pouring in all of these messages, and kids believe this. And it's hard to undo. It's hard to undo what we've done, right? You get hardwired for stuff. Hard to change. So this, I firmly believe, is connected to this. Books that objectify girls, again, all over the place. All over the place. Barbie's Princess School. Dime a dozen, I don't know if you know that. That means there's a lot of them out there. It's like all over the place, like I said. My Little Beauty Shop. Look at this one. The makeup I love. Today I'll be a princess. So again, what's the connection? So here's Scholastic that put out all sorts of inexpensive books for children. It's really a great vehicle to get books in kids' hands. But here's one, Red Riding Hood Gets Lost. There's Red Riding Hood, and look who the wolf is. How? What's the connection to this? I know it sounds dramatic, but objectifying a whole half of our population. Here's the book that's still around, The Five Chinese Brothers. They all look exactly alike. Guess what? Every semester I go and look at World Market and it's still there. What's the connection? I is for Indian, right? Let's play Indian. Let's play a whole culture. Talk about objectifying our fabulous Halloween costumes. Talk about disrespect. Great quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. Our nation was born in genocide when it embraced the doctrine that the original American, the American Indian, was an inferior race. What's the connection? Really what we should be asking is, what's the question? So here's the question we talk about a lot in this class. This is it, right here. How can we help counter sexist and racist messages? This is what we got to do. Change the message. This is a quote that's in every single one of my lectures. Quality multicultural literature provides an opportunity for all children to see themselves in books, fosters a positive self-esteem, and cultivates respect, empathy, and acceptance of people. We're going to talk about that a lot in terms of windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors and social justice. There it is one more time. So there's all sorts of definitions of multicultural children's literature. Just kind of skate through them kind of quickly. Typically, this is kind of the usual thing you think of. It focuses on people of color, diverse cultural, linguistic, and religious groups. When we're looking at it in this class, we're looking at children's literature about different racial, ethnic, and identity minority groups that are culturally and socially different from the Anglo-Saxon majority of the U.S., whose large and middle-class values and customs are most represented in American culture. So that's a really long one, right? Basically, what we're looking at is everybody that is considered to be outside of the mainstream of society and has been marginalized in some way. So that's a lot of people, right? That's a lot of cultures. That's a lot of identity cultures. It's a lot of groups. So the bottom line really is that we're looking at books outside of the dominant culture. And really, right now, pretty much our dominant culture is this definition, I think, pretty accurately. Male, white, heterosexual, Christian, temporarily able-bodied, youthful, and has access to wealth and resources. So I'm not here slamming white males, not slamming them at all. But what I'm saying is that we've had a standard from our founding fathers way back when to have a touchstone to look upon as what we measure everything else against, right? And we'll be talking about that a lot. So basically, the value of someone was measured against this, not like this, dead white president's this, but just against a white standard, right? So what this class does is look outside of that white basic standard of what is considered wowsy, and we move away from that and look at everything else away from that. And that focuses on gender, so it focuses on females in children's literature, and of course then it focuses on all sorts of cultures and identity cultures and people of color and people of different abilities and all of that. And we just dig into that a little bit, and I think that's pretty thrilling. And then you're thinking like, whoa, wait a minute, Kate, why are you making such a big old fuss about some kids' books, right? I am making a big fuss about kids' books because I love this stuff. And here's what a lot of people have to say, and that I have to say as well, is that when we look at what we provide for kids to see as models of our society, and we don't provide them with something outside of that dominant culture, we are like helping continue to screw up this world. That by giving them better and bigger books, and again, we'll talk about how to do that, we are helping children look beyond their world and out into other worlds, and making sure that they aren't necessarily this is such an old expression, the bee's knees, which means like fabulous. So they're not the only one in the world, right? And so we need to look at the idea that representation is so important in children's books. I mean, it's big stuff. It's big stuff. So what we've done is that we look at if we look at what a lot of classrooms are full of, I mean, it's getting so much better, so don't get me wrong, but a lot of stuff out there, the literature that we're looking at, the media that we're looking at, everything that we're looking at is always based on a certain idea of what is right, beautiful, successful, interesting, amazing, and all that. And it's, again, that white dominant culture. So if we continue to not change this conundrum in children's books, then what we do is we reinforce that dominant culture and figure, yeah, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're comparing everything about that. And you all know what I'm talking about in terms of this. And when we look at all the issues that we continue to have that have really erupted quite poignantly over the last couple of years, COVID aside, but in terms of some of the horrific things that have happened to people of color in all sorts of ways. And again, we'll look at that some more. So this is another definition of the dominant group, right, that keeps everyone else kind of in place, and it's a little diabolical, and we'll get into that a bit more. So I love this quote from Adrienne Rich, who was a poet. She said, when those who have the power to name and to socially construct reality, meaning they decide what is right and what is wrong, right? It's a construct. It's like it's made up. It's built up like long straight hair is beautiful. Pale skin is beautiful, right? So when they choose not to see or hear you, whether you are dark-skinned, old, disabled, female, or speak with a different accent or dialects than theirs, when someone with the authority of, say, a teacher, this is where a lot of it's coming from, describes the world and you are not in it, you're not in it. And a bunch of you know what I'm talking about when I say that. You're not in that world when you were growing up. There's a moment of psychic disequilibrium as you've looked into a mirror and saw nothing. I'm getting all dramatic about it, but I think it's a really important point that when one is not reflected in society, that it kind of messes up your head, right? And it happens all the time. We're talking about that so much more now, right? So the deal is that I know, and just deep down in my soul from my teaching for a while, I know that is happening to a number of students, that they did not feel reflected in their community, in their society, in their whatever, not in books, not in TV, not in music necessarily. And of course it's getting better, but it's still there, and I know it's there, and you know what I'm talking about. A lot of you know what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to go back to like, hello, like, shut up, Kate Rains, teacher. What are you just going on about? Because this is a class about kids' books. What's the big damn deal? And the big damn deal is there's lots of great books out there that just aren't addressing anything that I'm talking about, and they're okay. Like The Hungry Caterpillars, The Counting Book, and talking about oranges. And I mean, my main gripe with the book is that it's he, and all the animals and everything else is he all the time. Again, we'll talk about that. So that's my only gripe about this book. It's colorful, it's fun. So I'm not here to undermine the importance of these kind of books. I'm not. But what I am suggesting is what we do in this class, and what we need to do all the time is we need to deconstruct books. We need to make sure that we're looking at books with a critical eye, right? When we're talking about critical race theory and all that stuff down that's just erupting. And okay, I won't talk about that yet. That we really look at things and realize the damage they can do, even if it's subtle stuff. And oh my gosh, there's so many examples of that. Because here's the really scary thing, that kids are like hardwired by the time they're 5. They are ready to just be easy racist and sexist because that's what's been fed to them or shown to them or they've been entertained by. I'm not saying it's a big diabolical scheme as some of the things that are happening right now with the voting rights. I'm not saying that as something that's happening right now with Roe versus Wade and the right to make choices for your own body. Those are diabolical, right? But I'm not saying that this was necessarily a construct that was just put forth and like, boom, let's get these kids while they're still young and their brains are malleable. But what I'm saying is that this is what happens. You read these exciting, wonderful books to kids or show them media and or social media or examples out in our society, etc., then they believe it. Because why wouldn't they believe it? They're just so wonderfully gullible. You know, they trust us. And the problem with that is that they believe it is hard to undo. That's the thing. It's hard to undo. So if we can start them off without having to undo stuff, breaking bad habits and all that, it's a big deal. So it's important stuff when we look at children's literature. Big stuff as far as I'm concerned. I love this poet, Annie Dillard, and she talks about Alice in Wonderland. And if you grew up in the United States, you know this tale pretty good. And there's a Disney movie. And so it's kind of around, but the whole idea that this Alice girl, young woman, she was able to alter her experiences by taking a bite of a cookie or sipping on a little drink, and it changed her into different sizes, and so she could get really, really small and just slip through these cracks and literally kind of become invisible, right? And what Annie Dillard was saying in her book was like, that's a pretty crappy thing, that you just are rendered invisible. And that's what happens to a lot of our society. You know what I'm talking about? Whether you're of color or female or of different abilities, all sorts of stuff, that we are rendered almost invisible. And what do we do to counter that? In this class, we question the designated default. We look beyond the books that have been popular for a million years and they're filling our libraries, and we look at the books that are now slowly but surely, inch by inch, row by row, they're making their marks and pushing back some of these stories that have been told forever and accepted as the way to go. So I think my job as your teacher in here, even though we're just kind of reaching out through this computer and, mechanical devices, my job here still is to try to connect with you and give you the idea of how we can look at things a little differently. I'm just going to give you an example of this book. This book is lovely looking. Look at it. It's called Ms. Smith Reads or something. Miss. So I just do Miss. Ms. Smith Reads. I'm thinking, this is cool. Here's a teacher. She's pretty bomb-ass teacher, right? She's got some great hair and some great glasses. She's wearing this black leather jacket. So I pulled this book out in the public library a couple years ago, and it's like, okay, this is good. So I thought, she's good. She looks like a great teacher. Because surprisingly enough, 99% of books about teachers and picture books for young kids, they're mostly male teachers. But guess what? In real life, they're not mostly male teachers. So what the hell on that, right? So I think, okay, there's good. That's a good point. And she has this magic book. She opens up and they go into different lands. Her class, she takes them to different places. And this was in the time of the dinosaurs. And look, it's beautiful, the colors and stuff. So okay, that's pretty good. I looked at that, so I looked at the pictures really briefly. Didn't read the story all the way. And there's all sorts of kids coloring there. I said, that's good. It's not just a bunch of white kids. We got it going on here, right? So I check out the book. And then don't do what I'm supposed to do, is check it really out. And so I start reading the book to my little preschoolers, because I have a little preschool. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is not a good idea. Because here's what's happening with it. What's happening with it is that even though she's really cool, and in this pterodactyl takes her up into this nest, and like, oh, she needs to be saved. Okay, I don't like that. I want her to show her capableness, her. I was gonna swear. I'm trying not to swear. Okay, I'm gonna say her badassness, right? That she's this strong teacher. She's got a leather coat on. Come on, her hair's sticking up, but she has to get one of the kids to help her get rescued from this nest. And so this is just gonna sound like I'm crazy, but who do you think is the one person in the whole class that gets to save her? It's a white boy. And am I saying that's bad? Heck to the no, I'm not saying that's bad. But that message is reproduced all the time. So out of all the children in there, it's still going to be that dominant culture kid. And again, if it just happened randomly, fabulous. But these messages are reproduced and reproduced all the time, even with current literature. And I'm going to talk about that more because it's what I do. So what I am hoping you get out of this class, my hope and desire, is that you kind of look at things a little more critically when you're looking at things and like, oh, what's the big deal? So that's okay. It's a cute book, and it is a cute book. It's got cute kids in there, and they do really cool things in that book, that magic book that Ms. Smith has. Damn, that's great. But what we need to do is really kind of assess how important diverse children's books are. That's my deal in here. And I love it. I love it. I showed you this quote at the beginning. And again, some things one can see for oneself. Other things depend on the telling of the tale, how we tell these stories. And stories for children, they're big. They're really important. They're amazing. I don't know about for you, like the way that you get your stories. It could be through movies or through, video games or whatever. They're big, right? And so how do we make sure that we're telling really good stories that help reflect what our society, what our communities are really made up of, and how that we break down and deconstruct the crap that's out there that continues to keep us in really crummy positions as racist or sexist or not really kind of getting all of it, right? So I think that the really cool thing about children's literature is it guides children. I don't know about your stories guide you too, right? Whatever you consider your stories to be, that they guide you and they show you the way you're supposed to be as a human being, right? And what's appropriate in your society, in your culture, and what's respectful and kind and wonderful, right? So as you can tell, I'm like crazy about this subject. I hope you can tell that. I'm already 23 minutes into it, and I was only going to do 15, but you can tell that I'm crazy about it. So it's important stuff, I think. I think radical children's literature can save the world. I'm going to say that a lot in here. And you might just think I'm a kook living on this crazy little island. That's not like Gilligan's Island, if you ever saw that. It's a big island, but it's still, I live and breathe this stuff because I do think it can help change the world. And I'll talk about that more, even if you don't want to hear it. I'm going to talk about it. So, here we are. Boom! And I gave you that picture of that book because, remember, you don't know, but do you know, I'm old. I'm 69 years old. I've been around for a long time. And when I was growing up, I just loved this book. I loved it. And now when I look at things with discerning eyes, right, I know why I loved it. Because there weren't very many children's books for me that had a female lead. That simple. Right? And she's still white and I'm white, so, I didn't even think about that back then, but it was like a really cool story about a really cool girl that was doing really cool stuff. Wasn't happening when I was growing up. Like she's this witch, but she has this blue nose. This is way before Bewitched, with the wiggling her nose. She had a blue nose, so she had to cover it up. She had to cover it up so nobody would know she was a witch. And so the only time she could really be a witch, was when at Halloween. She could be a witch at Halloween, right? And she didn't. It's like she wasn't blowing her cover. And there was just so many cool things about it. Donuts. It was a great book, and it was basically a great book because it reflected a little bit about me. Not that I couldn't relate to other books, right? There's all sorts of books I could relate to with my gender as a female. This is a book I love. My Side of the Mountain. It was about a guy. It was about a boy about my age, and he got to leave his house and go live in the street, and he had a falcon, and I hated my home life, and that's all I wanted to do, and it was really cool, so I could relate to it. But wouldn't it have resonated a little bit more if it was I could find something like that about a girl? And for other, when we're looking at all of our other cultures, our identity cultures, wouldn't it resonate more? It was something that was in your heart, was part of your culture, your identity. Wouldn't that be so much better? So when you think about books or stories that you really liked as a child, because some of you might have not grown up a lot with a lot of books, maybe more traditional stories, when they really clicked for you, was it because you could really see yourself there? And in terms of why you left it? So think about those books, because I want to ask you about that. And maybe ask you to chat about that a little bit, because that's important stuff. Thinking about those books. And the deal is that things are getting better with books, with diverse books. And that's what this class is all about, right? We're looking at stuff so that not only the white teenager on my side of the mountain who got to go live in a tree because he lived in New York and his grandfather had acreage and he had the ability to do this and he got full support from his parents and it was just so fabulous. So now we're thinking like, well, where are my stories, right? Where are your stories? And I'm telling you that they're coming around more. And what's happening, which is really, 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 really important, I don't know why I did this, is that we can see fabulous, diverse children's books decentering dominant culture. That we just get them totally not out of the picture all the way, but some of the way, right? And there's good stuff out there, and we are so getting there. This is one of them. The day you begin. No, the day you begin. Begin school. So there's so many, and I'm going to share them with you and give you some read aloud since we're not really meeting in person so that you can really look at some stuff. Fabulous illustrations of person narrative. And what I mean by that is somebody telling the story that maybe is of that culture. Really, really important. Or the illustrations of that culture. Big stuff, right? And being more specific, like when we talk about American Indians, and which we will be doing, is that it's tribe specific, right? Salish Sea people right here. And we're going to talk about some of our identity cultures, disabled identities. I'm putting a slash in between that, and I'll talk about that more. Big, important things, right? One of my favorite, oh my gosh, she's Grace Lynn. She does all this stuff, and you're going to watch a TED Talk about her that talks about her evolution, and so cool. And some really kind of current stuff that is out there that is just going to knock your socks off. I'll have all the read alouds for most of these, and I'll be posting those. And just, again, talking about culture. So immigrants, and I'm not sure if that's a politically correct way to put it. I hope that sounds respectful. New citizens coming into the United States, bringing all of their traditions, and then trying to meld with these and clashing with some of these crazy traditions of United States. This is perfect. It's like, this book is so great. It's about the typical American, whatever that means, birthday party, and how this little girl right here could not, she had to drag her sister to the birthday parties, and then pretty soon she didn't get to go to them anymore because they're saying, yeah, your sister's a drag. And so her mother not understanding that, yeah, that's not so cool. So it's a fabulous story. We'll look at that. And then the LGBTQ culture, Patricia Polacco, which I have one of her videos. Oh my gosh, she's amazing. Amazing. And she's talking about why she wrote this book, because some stories weren't being told. So I don't know why that slide is blank. I didn't do anything about that. But so what we've got here in this class is a couple things going on, right? Is that it's an intensive writing class, and you're only taking it because you have to. I don't care. I'm not offended. because I love my stuff, and you're going to hear some of my stuff, whether you want to or not, right? So you pick this one, because maybe it just seems simple. We're just going to talk about, I don't know, whatever. But we're talking about a lot of I don't know, whatever. But we, in the meantime, have to do all this writing, right? So you know that's there. And then this specific class, Multicultural Children's Literature, is giving you that like boom, boom, boom. Let's look at books. So what does that all mean? It means there's so much writing in here. 5,000 words for each of them. And I go click, count all of them because I have to, right? Lots of writing. But lots of other stuff that we're talking about that is just so like not 2000 and late, right? So we're talking about some really sensitive subjects. And we're aiming to kind of undo and look into things in a kind of a critical way, right? And this is some of the things we do. Those are my objectives. Utilizing first-person accounts. That's what I'm talking about, of that culture, of that identity. And like looking at like why we need to really make sure we're telling just about everybody's story. That's what this class is about. And so, big quote, right? When children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, damn, what happens? They learn some big lessons, right? Have any of you been there before? I have. I'll tell you some of those stories when people were throwing rocks at me and stuff. And that's not anything compared to some of the other identity cultures or cultures, you know, some of the of color and stuff, and folks with disabilities and all of that stuff devalued in the society of which they're supposedly a part of, right? Supposed to be part of it. So by looking at some, here I go again, being a little loose here, kick-ass children's literature that helps us see us and everybody else, or just about everybody else, in a good light, in a positive light. That's what this class is talking about, or I want to talk about it. And I'm talking about it already, right? Talking about it. So it's not all about fun with Dick and Jane, this really old textbook, right? Fun with Dick and Jane. How about fun with Darius and Jada? How about fun just with Jada? Can Jada carry this story? Yeah, I think so. So the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they aren't true, but they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. So Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talks about it in this fabulous TED Talk. Maybe some of you have seen it. It is so important, and that's going to be one of your first assignments. So I think I'm just about done here. You can tell I'm pretty inspired, and I'm glad you're along for this journey. And I'm here to help you in any way that I can. And what can I show you? Can you see Jupiter way down at the end of the trail? We walk in the woods every day. So thanks so much for coming along. Sorry, most of the lectures are not this long. I just got a little bit carried away is what I can say. So I'm here for you. I'm glad you're here. Thanks. And I'll be talking at you soon, for sure.